Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine just reached a dangerous new level as a massive Russian convoy now closes in on Kyiv, while Putin ramps up attacks targeting civilians, even using so-called cluster bombs on Ukraine's second largest city in what President Zelensky calls an act of terrorism and a war crime. This is Outnumbered. Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-hosts Kaylee McEnany and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Rebecca Heinrichs and Joey Jones. Now, satellite images show what amounts to a 40-mile-long Russian killing machine moving towards Kyiv. The huge military convoy filled with tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery now raises fears of an all-out assault on the Ukrainian capital. At the same time, there is another troubling sign in a different strategic city, as surveillance video shows what looks like cluster bombs carrying out indiscriminate destruction in neighborhoods in Kharkiv. And as powerful explosions rocked an apartment complex, a missile strike targeted the city's square, one of the largest in Europe, and leading Ukraine's president to accuse Russia of war crimes while vowing to fight on for freedom in an emotional speech he gave to the European Parliament. Watch.
This is terror against the city. This is terror against Kharkiv, terror against Ukraine. It will not be forgiven. It will not be forgotten.
Can you imagine this one of two cruise missiles hit this Freedom Square? Dozens of killed ones. This is the price of freedom. We have proven our strength. We have proven that, as at a minimum, we are exactly the same as you are. So do prove that you are with us. Do prove that you will not let us go. Do prove that you indeed are Europeans. And then life will win over death, and light will win over darkness. Glory be to Ukraine.
After that standing ovation, let's go to Trey Yingst live in Kyiv. Trey?
Emily, good afternoon. Sirens continue to sound across Ukraine today as the Russians push forward with their invasion. In Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv, 2 cruise missiles hit a public square, Freedom Square, killing an unknown number of people. Officials calling that a war crime, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying it was undistinguishable from a terror attack. Now, this also comes as the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv today took missile strikes. Earlier this evening, a television tower was struck by a Russian missile, killing at least 5 people and sending more civilians underground to wait in shelters. Those who can't shelter in place and have the resources to go west are doing so. We were at the train station today as many families said goodbye. Take a look. A familiar scene unfolds in the Ukrainian capital. Uri Gretsenko says goodbye to his daughter and granddaughter. They're evacuating to the city of Lviv, near the Polish border.
We need to leave our homes to make our children safe. I never thought it would be like that. It's not a joke, but hell.
Like thousands of Ukrainian men, Uri will stay and fight as the Russian invasion continues.
My family, my daughter and granddaughter are leaving. I'm staying as I'm in the territorial defense.
People here are running out of time. There's a real understanding that Russian forces could surround the city in a matter of days. So the central train station in Kyiv is a major evacuation point for people looking to go west. The mood here is tense. There are checkpoints set up across the city. Ukrainian soldiers looking for Russian saboteurs, hoping they can block the roads before that big convoy of a nearly 40-mile-long load of Russian troops, artillery, and tank units comes to this city. Emily?
Trey, in addition to that harrowing footage you've been showing of the attempted evacuations and of the family saying goodbye, we also have video showing unarmed Ukrainians challenging Russian soldiers and telling them to go home. Let's play it. We'll get your thoughts on the other side, Trey. Can you tell us about that resistance there on the ground?
You see these videos of incredible bravery by the Ukrainian civilians, not only here in the capital of Kyiv, but across the country. People standing in front of tanks and armored vehicles. They're willing to risk their lives asking these Russian troops, why did you come here? It's the question on the minds of so many. Those who can fight are doing so, civilians and soldiers alike, getting as many weapons as they can, appealing to the international community for help and digging their heels in. Emily?
Trey Harris has a question for you.
You know, Trey, with those reports, and we were talking about this with Lucas Tomlinson earlier, that Russian troops are less than 5 hours away potentially. Where they're headed now would be toward one of the points where people can actually get out, and that's on the border with Poland. I mean, what would that mean for people? What options would they have if, in fact, that reporting yields truth and they reach in such a short period of time?
It's a great question. There's a massive humanitarian refugee crisis unfolding in parallel to this story of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And it complicates things for the civilians here who are oftentimes caught amid the crossfire. I think the most concerning comment we heard today was from the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko.
Yes.
There are some reports today that the Ukrainians could consider targeting inside the territory of Belarus, since many of the missiles and fighter jets are taking off from there. Now, if this happens, Lukashenko, the leader there, says that carpet bombing is a possibility not only in this city but across Ukraine. The devastating toll on civilians would be incalculable. Harris?
Trey, Kaylee here. You hear of carpet bombing and just your heart sinks. And you couple that with what we know, that a veterans rehab facility was shelled, a maternity hospital was shelled, schools have been hit, nurseries have been hit. And then you couple that with the reporting from NBC that there's a U.S. intelligence assessment that says Putin's been exhibiting unusual bursts of anger, and that he might see his only option way out of this is doubling down on the violence. We certainly hope not. But what are you seeing there on the ground?
People are doing everything they can to get out of harm's way. The video we showed yesterday of that mother waiting in a hospital with her daughter is heart-wrenching. I mean, these civilians who don't have the resources to go west simply have to go underground, and they're waiting out these shellings. But they will eventually run out of food and supplies and medicine, the things that we often take for granted, not in a war zone. And when they do, that ratchets up the tension here to such a level that people will still try to flee amid the crossfire, and the civilian casualties will likely rise. Back to you.
Trey, thank you so much for your insight and your analysis. As always, stay safe, and we'll bring you back soon.
Thank you.
Bringing in the rest of our panel now. Joey Jones, what does that 40-mile-long convoy mean tactically, strategically? What does it really mean for those in the ground?
Yeah. Thanks for asking me that question, Emily. And I actually want to address a couple of nomenclature things so people at home understand why these things are important as I get to that 40-mile convoy. First of all, the idea of using a thermobaric bomb, that's something that's been talked about all morning, that's been accused of a potential war crime, using it as a bunker buster. Let me explain what that means. That essentially means this is a sophisticated bomb that, without any further explanation, will set the air on fire. And what does that mean? It means that it can incinerate you from the inside out when it blows up. It sets the air in your lungs on fire. It sets the air around you on fire, and it does it through sophisticated means. So they call them bunker busters because if Ukrainian soldiers or even diplomats or government officials are hiding in bunkers, if this bomb can penetrate down into a cave, it can set the air in that cave on fire and incinerate what's in it. They're ruthless. They're similar to our mother of all bombs. They're all over the world. I've talked to a buddy a few minutes ago who's taken a bunch of them apart. The second nomenclature I want to talk about are cluster bombs. Cluster bombs are bombs that break apart in the sky and turn, or as they're flying from artillery or from a plane, and they turn into dozens, if not 50 or 100 small bombs. They're designed to blow up vehicles. They're actually an anti-tank munition is what is inside of them. But the reason why this is important is they have so many mechanisms within them that if they don't go off when they hit the ground, they can go off indiscriminately. You can pick one up and it'll go off. Kids could pick one up and it would blow up. It's just very ruthless. And these are things that are designed for conventional military, not to be used in an urban terrain. And so when we talk about these types of munitions, why it's such a shock is they really are indiscriminate, and the way they kill is very ruthless, and it's something that should never be used in this setting where Ukraine isn't even mounting an offense against Russian troops. It's fully offensive.
Very fast follow-up, Joey. What is the range of that hyperbaric bomb, the one that sets the air on fire? If it's dropped in a city without a cave, will it go forever?
No, it's big, but it depends on the size and type. You can employ such a bomb in different ways, from a helicopter, from an airplane. I believe from a helicopter, from an airplane. I don't know there's a ground-to-ground version, but they make them in different sizes because they're used for different reasons. And you put one into any kind of civilian residential building, it's a really bad day.
Yeah, it's a good point to make that distinction, because people have heard the mother of all bombs. I believe we use them on a tunnel complex in Afghanistan against the enemy. So this is military to military. But this actually is called, Joey, the father of all bombs. So Geneva Convention looks at this, it's like a step up, if you will. Well, and there's been some time since those things were deployed, right? So the technology has changed a little bit. But when you use that on a civilian population, I'm thankful of your knowledge today, because no one has described it as well as you of what it does to the human body, and why the Geneva Convention would never allow this, and why they would see this as a war crime, that it would be used on a civilian population in a hospital or wherever it would be. You can't get away from it.
There's no excuse for it in this setting, in my opinion, and that's what makes this so ruthless. We have a lot of our viewers that are confused, and I think we should admit in this moment there's a lot of propaganda out there from both sides. I reported over the weekend about the Snake Island 13, that they were dead. Now there's a report that they weren't. But I think what I want to say to our viewers is they didn't have to die for this to be an unjust war. They didn't have to die for their defiance to be inspirational, and it's not our job to report propaganda from either side. We're just trying to show our viewers the potential of what's happening in Ukraine.
Bringing in Rebecca now, you have proposed that the U.S. leads a massive NATO exercise. Tell us why.
Well, thanks for having me. I think at this point, just what Joey just explained to viewers, I think is so critical, because I think the next several days are going to be horrific, the images coming out. So even as we keep soft hearts and have compassion for what's going on, we need to have tough skin and strong minds, because what I'm fearful of is that this war could escalate further outside the borders of Ukraine. And so U.S. actions and NATO actions, as we support the people of Ukraine, which we ought to, are so important. So what I've argued is these threats that Putin continues to make, these veiled and not so veiled nuclear threats against NATO, that should signal to us that it is our turn now to demonstrate serious resolve, that is stepping into a NATO country, that any kind of crossing the threshold to nuclear employment, even if it's these theater, low-yield nuclear weapons, that would be crossing a line that the Russians will be made to regret. And so we need to demonstrate that resolve right now by strong NATO military exercises that includes U.S. Nuclear delivery systems in those exercises.
Right. Great discussion, guys. Moving forward, President Biden will be giving the State of the Union address.
President Biden will give his first State of the Union address tonight. And given Russia's brutal assault on Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is raising concerns of nuclear war and severe economic pain here in the United States. This shapes up as the most consequential speech of the president's career. It also presents an opportunity to unite the country. Here's White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on what we can expect.
He will definitely spend time in the speech talking about the conflict in Ukraine, his efforts to rally the world, to lead the world in responding to and standing up to autocratic leadership. What people will also hear from him for a great deal of the speech is his plan, not only the progress we've made a lot of economic progress, but his commitment to addressing prices, addressing costs, addressing inflation.
He's got a lot to do, Joey Jones. And you know that infamous line from Gerald Ford, the State of the Union is not good. Every State of the Union, I think about what word fits best in that blank. The State of the Union is X, Y, or Z. And the optimal word that comes to mind with President Biden is crises. That seems to be the state of our union.
Absolutely. I hope that the president takes the stage tonight, not with his polls in mind, not with the midterms in mind, perhaps not even with the outcome of this war in mind, but with the prosperity of our country in mind. I hope that the president takes the stage tonight and delivers a message that tells Americans they've been heard, whether he agrees with them or not, that the moms at school boards, that the Ukrainian Americans, that the Americans living on the south border, that Americans that are struggling with issues that he may not agree with the solution that they propose, he hears them and that he knows what they're going through. That goes a long way. We talk about unity. Unity is not going to happen around a solution. Unity is going to happen around acknowledging the problem, and that's where our president needs to start. I don't expect it, and I hate to be that way. It's true, but that's what we need, and that's what we deserve.
Very wise words, and underscoring that point, Joey, was David Axelrod, longtime Obama advisor, back on February 14th, so before the Russia invasion began. He gave some advice to President Biden in this New York Times essay. It's called Mr. President, It's Time for a Little Humility. And in part, here's what it says. The State of the Union is stressed to claim otherwise, to highlight the progress we have made without fully acknowledging the hard road we have traveled and the distance we need to go would seem off-key and out of touch. You simply cannot jawbone Americans into believing that things are better than they feel. This advice is apparently circulated among top Biden allies, Emily, but it's unclear whether senior officials in the White House are listening to that advice or agree with Axelrod. I certainly do.
That's right. And Niall Ferguson actually laid it out perfectly, because he pointed out after Carter's disastrous State of the Union address, Reagan was surgical in response. Remember, I find no national malaise. I find nothing wrong with the American people. And the reason that that resonated with voters was because there really was a clear causal link between the foreign policy failures and inflation and feeling it in your home. And Carter delivered his speech between two major geopolitical disasters, right? The Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Just like here, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Carter's approval rating had touched an all-time low of 28% in June of '79. He never got back above 40% as his campaign unfolded. And inflation, which had stood at 5.2% in the month where he was inaugurated, hit an all-time high of 14.6% in April of 1980, driven skyward by the surge in oil prices that followed the Iranian Revolution. So we are in a very familiar situation here. And frankly, Biden is really fortunate that in the press coverage he's been getting from the New York Times and the Washington Post, they've been quite forgiving of him, and they were much tougher of their coverage of Carter. But in my opinion, the press won't be enough to make up for this Carter 2.0 presidency.
It's a great comparison. And Harris, to me, his mission is two-pronged. Number one, have a sober leveling with the American people, acknowledge their pain. But number two, send a strong message to an autocratic leader, what we heard Jen Psaki say that he will do.
You're right about that. I mean, there are multiple audiences, right? All of those leaders south of the border are watching too. They want to see if he's going to make it a priority, because people are coming through their countries to try to get to this one. And it's trampling along the way our relationships that former President Trump was working on, but he did it through a different manner, right? Through trade policies and a little bit of strong arming too. So everybody's watching. One person who'll be watching closely will be the former ambassador of the United States, or the UN, to the UN, and that is Nikki Haley. And she was on with me today. And what she said about China was really quite chilling. She said it was clear that at Beijing, China and Russian leaders were, they were glad-handing. They were hanging out. And now China is upset with Russia because they've handled this so poorly. So they're now learning how to invade a country better than Russia did it. They're going to school on that. And what she said was, can you believe we're still depending on China to shore up Russia and for Russia to do a deal with Iran? Like, we can't get off our dependency on them. Here it is, watch.
The idea that Biden would go ask China for help with Russia sickens me to my core. When you're going to one enemy to get help with another enemy, do you know how weak that looks? We've got to stop all of this embarrassment. At some point, learn the fact that when tyrants say they're going to do something, we should learn the lesson they're going to do it.
You know, it furthers the question, and I'd be curious to know what Rebecca thinks about this kind of on the world stage. Why can't Biden see who our enemies aren't and who our friends might be? Neither one of them is ever going to be a friend. So when you go to one and back channel with one about the other, they will always choose each other before they choose us. And that's what's happening.
That is exactly what's happening. And Rebecca, maybe you can address that point and also address Zelensky spoke to CNN. He said that he had a phone call with President Biden. He also said that tonight during the State of the Union, this is Zelensky saying this, President Biden needs to say something, quote, useful. What could Biden say that is, quote, useful?
Wow.
Well, I guess two points I would say. One, I agree with Harris about this identifying friends and enemies. I mean, this is foreign policy 101. Know who your friends are and then be a great friend to them.
Yes.
Shore up their defenses, do what is necessary, look at what they're asking for, listen to them. That's one of the failures of the Biden administration. They came in, he immediately started beating up on the Poles. The Saudis, who have internal problems, but they've been great partners in deterring Iran. And he went and was hard on the Saudis. And then he reached out to the Germans, which have been very problematic for the NATO alliance. And then, of course, he kind of downplayed all of these Russia threats, cyber attacks on the part of Russia against the United States, which signaled that he wasn't going to stand up to Russia. And that's why Putin got the idea that now is the time to actually invade Ukraine. So he does have all of these things backwards, and we need to have a president who gets that point right. That will affect so much for the United States.
And what should that message be tonight from Biden? What would be seen as strong in the eyes of Putin and useful in the eyes of Zelensky?
I mean, I think what he needs to say right now is that the United States is going to be energy independent. We are no longer going to pursue the Green New Deal stuff, not now. I know that's not what he's going to say. He's going to say the opposite of that. But that's going to demonstrate that the United States is serious about not declining as a major power, and that we are going to keep the military equipment, aids, medical equipment coming to Ukraine. As long as they're willing to fight their fight, we will continue to fund them and provide the necessary equipment that they need to carry out this fight.
Yeah, Joey, same question to you. What does Vladimir Putin need to hear?
Vladimir Putin needs to hear that he's not going to get away with this. But I'll take it a step back and say what Americans need to hear is an explanation from our president of why this war matters to our current government. We have a lot of viewers here at Fox especially that no longer trust anything the government says. And they're going to run in the wrong direction on this if they don't get good information. That's our responsibility, but it's also the responsibility of our president to lay out to Americans why we're helping Ukraine and why it's important to stifle Russians' attempted expansion.
Yeah, well, the stakes are high, and America will be watching. The world will tonight at 9 p.m. Be right back. More Outnumbered. Well, Fox News alert. The European Union just voted overwhelmingly to accept Ukraine's application for membership. Another poke in the eye for Vladimir Putin. This is long overdue, in my view, Harris. I mean, it's great to now see Germany saying we'll increase defense spending. It's great to see Europe come to the side of Ukraine. But why now? It's a little late.
Well, look, I mean, all of this is coming about because everybody looks across and they see how small that territory is over there. I mean, suddenly the continent just got a whole lot smaller.
Yes.
Because the biggest monster in the room has decided to flex and kill people at the same time. I liken it to something I talked to the Ambassador Haley about today, and it's this idea that Finland is now wanting to give weapons and you know, coordinate to help Ukraine, and they also would like to become a NATO member, like today, like now. They want to apply for that. And she said it's very complicated now because you've got 30 countries, everybody's got to agree, and that country has to bring something to the table. And at wartime, I mean, you can understand why Finland or others would want it. You look around and look how long they waited to do something. But I will continue to ask this question. Haven't we still always had the biggest voice in the room when you put NATO leaders together?
Yes.
Why was it that President Biden couldn't take along some great persuaders? You know, and in our constellation, we have people like Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota. We have people like Trey Gowdy, who wrote a book about the power of persuasion, right? You needed those people in the room to say, look, they've been massing troops since 15 minutes after Afghanistan failed. I mean, maybe he wouldn't put it that way, but that's really true. It was in October. It was just like a few days later. So he's been doing this. You guys are closest to him. Maybe we start to do something with the sanctions now. But what did he tell us on January 19th? That if there's a minor incursion, like a smaller type of invasion, right? Paraphrasing, but the minor incursion is a quote. He might have to fight with those NATO members to figure out what they do.
Yeah.
There wasn't unity until lives were wiped away, people not coming back.
Right.
In Ukraine.
Right. It all feels too late. And Emily, you know, I have this juxtaposition in my mind of Zelensky, who gives this amazing speech to the EU. He gets a minute and 10 seconds of rousing standing ovation, well-deserved. And I can't help but contrast that to what just happened at the UN, where you have Lavrov on remote. He can't even get there because airspaces are closed. Lavrov of Russia, Kremlin spokesperson. And you have the UN Human Rights Council walk out and 100 people follow behind him. So Lavrov is left in this room. Get this, with China, Russia, Syria, and Venezuela. Good company for Russia. That's who they're left with.
Good company. It looks like people are getting expelled from the schoolyard. If I can make a quick point about that EU membership, obviously that's incredibly significant. And everything that we've been hearing, sorry, NATO, thank you.
Yeah, Zelensky wants into the EU right now.
Yes.
And he got it.
Because it's a stick in the eye.
That's what I thought.
Stick in the eye.
Didn't we just say that?
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and keep in mind on the heels of the UK's exit, that's remains 27 member states remain. This is a huge financial boon. And I also think this will have a significant impact on the refugee status, right? Because all of a sudden it's coming from an EU country. And then in terms of the threats going on that Putin has made against now leaders of Ukraine, the specific ones also target Zelensky, that his use of mobile phones may pose a specific threat. Sources have been telling Fox News that it really increases the potential awareness for his location, and for the same reason that Putin has been refusing to use a mobile phone and the like. And so I think we're going to see that as reports of Putin sort of becoming, quote, unhinged and the like, right? The empire of lies. He's ramping up his threats, that will have a significant potential impact on Zelensky, and his safety remains paramount.
Yeah, Rebecca, take a look at these images. To Emily's point, you see these long tables. We have two images that we'll put up of Putin on one end of the table and whoever he's meeting with on the other end. There's reports that he's isolated. I mean, look how isolated can you get? You can't even sit next to someone because he's paranoid of COVID. He's protecting himself in his little bubble as I think of all these young kids dying at his hands. I mean, it's an extraordinary comparison when you look at it.
No, it is. And, but I would just caution a little bit to think that all of this will go away and the problem will go away if just Putin goes away, because he still has a general staff that's even more, aggressive than even Putin can be. And so I think that the problem is Putin, of course, but it's it's all the people around. One more point I would make too, the Biden administration has been very risk averse because we don't want to be seen as contributing directly to the kinetic action of the Ukrainians. But there's so much more we can do kind of on those lower rungs of escalation, it's called. We could be sending in drones, letting the Ukrainians do it, and conducting electronic warfare that can stop some of this activity that the Russians have been doing. And we don't have to say it was us. I mean, the Biden administration keeps coming out and saying, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. They need to zip it. They need to say this is Ukraine's war, and we will support Ukraine, and they need to stop taking tools off the table for the United States as we continue to do things that levy a high price against the Russians for their continued illegal, aggressive act against the innocent Ukrainian people.
It's a fascinating point you make. Apparently, Putin's isolated himself from some of the billionaires and the elites, but he's kept that team around him of generals that encouraged Crimea in 2014. But hey, if I'm one of those generals advising Putin, you need to start thinking about The Hague, because that's probably where you're going next. Coming up, as more than
State Department, Jillian, a lot of people, even Secretary Condoleezza Rice told me this on Sunday, a lot of people just say he's not the same, and that the thought of him having nuclear weapons is more frightening than ever.
It is, and I believe that interview you conducted, Harris, set off a flurry of concern, not just here at the State Department, but all across Washington over on Capitol Hill. Before Secretary Rice even said anything to you on Sunday, interestingly enough, some foreign leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron, the president of Finland, the president of Sweden, and others had made comments that they were also concerned about Putin's health. So she is far from alone. I want to flag for you, Harris, I am getting some new information this hour about concerns related to President Zelensky's traceability. This is coming from sources who are familiar with the threats he faces on the ground inside Ukraine. Here at the State Department, though, just a short while ago, a senior official told us that the U.S. is coordinating very closely with the Ukrainian government on all things related to Zelensky intelligence and information. Now, this as well, sources say the concern is really focused on Zelensky's use of the web and social media to communicate with the Ukrainian people. We're told the easiest way for Putin and the SVR to track and target Zelensky is through his mobile phone and internet use. Secretary of State Tony Blinken, through all of this, is laser focused on Vladimir Putin today. He spoke earlier this morning at the UN Human Rights Council. Take a listen to what he said about Putin.
We must send a resolute and unified message that President Putin should unconditionally stop this unprovoked attack, as the Secretary General and the High Commissioner have done, and immediately withdraw Russian forces from Ukraine.
This message comes amid an outpouring of concern from current and former U.S. officials, as we just spoke a moment ago, about concerning Putin's mental state. Take a listen.
Well, this is an authoritarian leader, 20 years he's been in power. The last 2 years, he's even been more isolated. He was very COVID phobic.
I don't think he's a rational actor.
The perception among some foreign leaders like Emmanuel Macron of France is that even when one-on-one, Putin is keeping his distance. After that encounter you're looking at, Macron described the Russian leader as, quote, more rigid and more isolated. The State Department also tells me today, Harris, they have long been aware of the tendencies of autocrats just like Putin. They say the inclination is they surround themselves with people who think like them, who believe the same things that they believe, and they share information with these autocrats that they think they want to hear. So the odds of Putin getting exposed to any reality is very slim. Harris.
And would he accept it anyway? If he's not rooted in reality, how much would he drink of reality? Jillian Turner, thank you very much. And that latest news on the traceability of Zelensky, too, because it's been his personal touch, if you will, that has helped hold the world and the people together on helping them. Thank you. Well, as we discussed earlier, Vladimir Putin is creating a refugee crisis in just a matter of days. The UN is estimating up to 600,000 people have already fled Ukraine to escape Russia's brutal invasion. Many are flooding Ukraine's border with Poland, and that's where we saw Lucas Tomlinson a short time ago. That's in the western part of the country. Lines of people in cars stretching for some 8 miles. The wait time to cross the border more than 40 miles now. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, the capital city, panic. It's happening. They're doing panic buying of life's essentials, and it's stripping grocery store shelves bare. Sky Barkley is an American on the ground in Ukraine working with Christian organization Here's Hope Ministries. And Sky, thank you for being in focus. First of all, tell me what you're trying to do and how hard it is to accomplish that.
It's been immensely difficult since we landed on the ground. We came here originally to plug in and do medical work, which is what I've done overseas in the past in Iraq and in Syria. However, in flying here, the next day the invasion happened, and we were unable to link up with our driver. He fled with his family. We were unable to secure medical supplies. We only had a small cache in country. We were only able to fly in with a certain amount of cash. So, of course, securing money has been immensely difficult. And it's been, as you can understand, fairly chaotic. So we're still trying to get the ball rolling on getting humanitarian supplies into the country. We just had to leave Kiev yesterday. We rolled over to Ternopil to link up with the rest of our team. And that movement took 2 days, where it only should have taken 1.
You know, we are getting reports now from our crew who's on the ground in Lviv, which is that exit point across into Poland, that Russian forces are headed in that direction. Talk to me about the people that you're meeting, their resolve, and they know they're in danger. I know we only have a few seconds because we don't want to keep you up too long. Go ahead.
No worries at all. I've been so impressed with the Ukrainian people. I cannot expound enough about their patriotism. They're brave. I mean, you're seeing these men, take up arms when yesterday they were working their office jobs. What more can I say about that? And the conventional forces are extremely professional. Their medics know what they're doing. They're well trained. They're prepared for these mass casualty incidents that are inevitably going to happen. They're maybe not, the civilian population may have not been ready for this fight. They're not used to growing up in a war zone. It's not like me going into Syria, where people have been living in a war for the last decade.
Sky, we have to let you go, but we'll bring you back later this week to check in with you. We're looking out for you. I know it's hard. Sky